That old dude seems to be just a high school grad.
As soon as he saw me, Mike, the new coworker I'd never met, was happily whispering to his colleagues.
He must have screwed up big time. Otherwise, getting demoted like that doesn't just happen, right? Wonder how many years it's been since he was back at the headquarters.
He thought he was whispering quietly, but in our small department, everyone could hear.
There's no place here for a demoted high school grad, old man.
I decided it was a waste of energy to get angry at him, and chose to ignore whatever was said.
How about you water the office plants or collect everyone's trash papers to shred?
Mike handed me some documents that were no longer needed. Just then, the beautiful secretary, Julia, approached me.
What are you standing around for? Come on, you're not the newbie here.
I almost burst out laughing and instinctively looked down.
No, this guy might as well be a newbie. A comeback from a demotion, right? That's even worse than a newbie.
Here is the CEO's seat.
Mike turned pale and started shaking after hearing Julia's words. My name is Matthew. I'm a 45-year-old salaried worker. Actually, I could have taken over my family's business, but I continued with my current job at my parents' suggestion. My family owns a small hotel in a tourist spot. That said, it's now a declined tourist spot. Back in the day, it used to be somewhat popular and bustling. Once, a young actor popular among the youth stayed at our hotel, leading to a booking frenzy that even I, then a student, had to help out with. That experience got me involved in the hotel business, cleaning the entrance every morning and wanting to contribute to my parents' efforts. While my friends traveled around various parts of Europe with their families, I hadn't traveled until I was an adult, choosing a college close to home and barely leaving my local area. Thus, helping out at the hotel and hearing stories from guests about their hometowns became my joy. I'd never visited the kind of shops or overseas influenced cafes they talked about, not available in my local area. There are many tourist spots besides this one, and I've received lots of recommendations for accommodations and places to visit from our guests. I hope to visit them someday. I noted down all of it in my notebook. In gratitude for their stories, I shared information about recommended spots around the hotel. I made it a point to provide information not found in travel magazines, and it seems word of mouth spread that it was considered lucky to meet me. But those busy days didn't last. Shockingly, the famous actor was arrested for a scandal. And at the same time, the economy went downhill. Our once lively hotel quieted down. This phenomenon was not just at my family's place, but was happening at tourist spots all over the country. My parents had to protect the livelihood of our employees and still support me, a student. Despite never having seen them fight before due to their strong relationship, my parents started arguing daily because of various anxieties. It seems my dad frequently sought loans from the bank, but with every business struggling, the bank was overwhelmed with people in similar situations. There were days when even getting a chance to talk was impossible. I overheard my parents saying that somehow they managed to secure a loan through consultation, but my dad lamented,
"If we can only borrow a small amount, there's no way we can turn this around."
Hearing my dad's anguished voice made my heart clench. In the end, my dad decided to turn down the bank loan and shut down the hotel. I'll never forget the sight of my parents apologizing to the employees. Afterwards, both my dad and mom were looking for work, but jobs were hard to come by as everyone was in the same boat. Having been used to meals served at the hotel, I couldn't adjust to a more modest lifestyle. So, after graduating high school, I decided to get a job. I really wanted to go to college and study business management, but saying that would only make my parents suffer more. I decided to work in something I liked at least, holding on to hope for a better future, and got a job at an advertising agency. However, it wasn't a permanent position, but a temporary one, covering for an employee on maternity leave. Even my dad couldn't secure a permanent position, so it was a tough time for a high school grad like me to become a full-time employee.
You should be grateful you got a job at all.
My mom told me when I confided in her. Luckily, my mom managed to get a part-time job at a supermarket through a friend, which barely kept our household afloat. My dad, in the end, took on several jobs like delivering newspapers and packages to make ends meet. In the midst of all this, I may indeed be a happy person as I was able to find a job. But the job was complicated, because that means going to a bank and getting a job. When I reluctantly went to the bank, they quickly gave me work due to our long-standing relationship, entrusting me with a significant responsibility as a newbie. The task was to create posters and pamphlets for a campaign offering domestic trips to new account holders. Fortunately, it was my field of expertise, and I quickly became motivated to do it. I suggested tourist spots I had heard about from guests, and the bank's representative agreed with my proposals, resulting in posters and pamphlets we were both happy with. I enjoyed talking with clients, and, though I was anxiety, began to feel like sales might be my calling. Then, the day I dreaded arrived. The employee on maternity leave was returning. It had only been a year since I joined. Honestly, I thought they might keep me on in some capacity, but that was wishful thinking.
We're still running on the edge of business in a recession.
The president apologized me. Just when I thought things were going well with the bank and I was about to take the next step. With a heavy heart, I visited the bank and other clients I had handled to report the change in responsibility and to say thanks for their support, however brief it had been. Then, the bank's PR representative, Julia, said something surprising.
Wait, Matthew, you're leaving. I had no idea it was just a temporary position. That's such a waste. You're young and have so much potential. Let me talk to someone about this.
I couldn't understand what she was talking about and just tilted my head.
Actually, my dad is the CEO of this bank.
She offered to speak directly to the CEO about hiring me. It might sound unbelievable now, but back then, getting a job through connections wasn't rare at all. Still, I felt hesitant about being indebted to this bank, which hadn't been able to help us in the past. That was my only concern, but being unemployed would worry my family more, so I decided to ask her for help. Really, I haven't found my next job yet, and was quite in a bind. Your help would be greatly appreciated. And so, I was able to secure my next job. My parents had mixed feelings when they found out I was going to work at the bank. But I decided to look at it differently. The bank didn't help our family. Yet, they had considered giving us a small loan. I thought, why not change the bank to be more flexible, to help more people like us? Working at the bank, dealing with money, I was careful. The most rewarding part was being able to talk to many people as a local bank employee. Of course, My job involved opening accounts and selling products. But what I enjoyed most was listening to customers' old stories and current worries. It felt like going back in time. Reports of a new grandchild or photos from a sports day. When an elderly customer said, "I'm lonely at home by myself," I found myself saying, "Come to the bank anytime. I'll listen." Perhaps because of this, I became the top salesman in our branch without even realizing it. Praised by the branch manager, I was even entrusted with training the newbies, and I came to think that working at the bank was a good thing. A few years after joining, I moved away from counter services to working in the field. I became fully operational as a salesperson. Having experience from the advertising agency, I felt joy in finally doing sales work. I wanted to extend a helping hand to people who thought they could turn their lives around if only they could get a loan. Like my family once did, I didn't want anyone to live a modest life or feel miserable. While working hard, I hoped that no one would have to endure the misery. However, my boss, Adam, was reluctant to lend to companies that were struggling financially. This is because the risks for banks are high. We couldn't afford to have the loans default. I understood that well.
You know, reporting struggling companies every day, but the bank isn't so lenient as to lend easily.
Of course, I understand that. But even so, I'm proposing companies that I believe can make a turnaround. I didn't want to give up. I didn't want to see more companies shut down, leaving their owners' heart broken. Moved by my determination, Adam approved a loan for one case.
Make sure you're making the right call.
Thank you. I'll do everything to support the company's recovery. Trying to contain my excitement, I headed to the small factory. The owner of the small factory, with tears streaming down his face, thanked me after hearing my story. He was just like my dad had been, struggling to keep the business afloat while supporting his employees. He was at his limit. I worked closely with him to plan for the future and explain the loan details. I was desperate because my job was on the line if they didn't make the repayments. Seeing his face deep in thought, I felt a warmth in my heart, knowing that this opportunity came because the loan was approved. I'm going to help turn around even more companies. I worked my hardest every day. But less than a year later, that small factory went bankrupt. Hearing the news, I was drenched in cold sweat because the loan money wasn't coming back. Adam patted me on the shoulder as I hung my head.
Seeing the reality now, the bank isn't a charity. If you run on emotion alone, we'll all go down together.
Adam's words pierced my heart. The face of the small factory's owner at that time is etched in my mind. The face that, while shedding tears, smiled painfully, relieved that he could finally protect his family and employees. In the end, I couldn't protect that owner, his family, or his employees. I had only given them hope without any real support. As I spiraled into despair, Adam spoke firmly to me.
Come on, Matthew. Don't dwell on this forever. Move forward. I think you need to learn more. You have potential and plenty of room to grow.
He placed a paper on my desk. This is. With trembling hands, I looked at the paper, which listed my transfer destination.
You will seconded to a subsidiary. This isn't a demotion. You'll work on debt collection there. Learn a lot. It's going to be tougher, but it will make you grow. Come back here when you've grown.
Honestly, I thought I was about to be fired. Actually, around the time I became an employee, my parents had restarted managing the hotel again. I had just called them, considering resigning from the bank to take responsibility.
We've just restarted the hotel business. We can afford to hire you.
I was rejected by my dad.
It's not decided yet that you're fired. Keep up the good work at the bank where you're still employed.
My mom encouraged me. Though I was shocked by the event, Adam's words lifted my spirits. Adam had worked here before and told me that experience had broadened his perspective. I'll start over and do my best. I pumped myself up. I'll grow to meet Adam's expectations, get closer to the customers, and return to the main office. I made up my mind and went to the subsidiary. The job there was different. Customers continuously apologized. With a face full of regret and tears, they plead for an extension of the payment deadline. Some people would default, so I had to chase them down to recover the money. Unlike the main office, there was nothing fun or fulfilling. Sometimes customers would yell at me, asking what I wanted to do to make them suffer more. My mental and body were damaged, and it was really tough. But having seen my parents struggle just as much, I knew I couldn't falter over something like this. I learned firsthand that banking isn't all about ideals. I'm learning from scratch, studying management for Adam, who taught me this lesson, and my parents, who support me from behind the scenes. If the factory hadn't gone bankrupt, I wouldn't be in this harsh environment. However, if it had gone well, I might have been heading in the wrong direction, mistaking the bank for a charity, extending help to anyone. Thinking about it, I'm truly grateful to Adam for setting me straight. After that, I continued in debt collection for 10 years and have now been decided to return to the head office. Looking back, those days were tough, but they flew by in the blink of an eye. When I returned to the head office after 10 years, my former colleagues warmly welcomed me. Some had already retired, but they congratulated me on my return to the head office via email. However, among them, there was someone who didn't think well of my return.
That old dude seems to be just a high school grad.
As soon as he saw me, Mike, the new coworker I'd never met, was happily whispering to his colleagues,
He must have screwed up big time. Otherwise, getting demoted like that doesn't just happen, right? Wonder how many years it's been since he was back at the headquarters.
though he thought he was whispering quietly in our small department. Everyone could hear. I had heard rumors about him, that he was a capable new employee. However, his disrespect was too much, and I couldn't help but get angry. When our eyes met, I didn't look away, but cleared my throat instead. Then, Mike said to me with a grin,
There's no place here for a demoted high school grad, old man. Sorry to burst your bubble coming back to the head office, but everyone knows a low education doesn't amount to much here.
I struggled to keep my anger in check. After all, he was just a kid, more than 15 years my junior. Deciding it was a waste of energy to get upset over such a person, I chose to ignore whatever was said. Maybe he takes pride in his high education. This must be the only place he can show it off, so let him flaunt it all he wants.
Speaking of which, a high school graduate is rare, huh? You may be from a low-income family. That would explain why you couldn't go to college.
Toby mocked not just myself, but also my parents was unexpected. Yet, I had learned a lot from my time in debt collection. People who want to say something usually stop once they've said their piece. Once he seemed to have finished, I headed to my desk. Then he spoke up again.
Too bad, but there's no seed for you. How about watering the plants or collecting everyone's trash papers to shred?
He handed me some documents that were no longer needed. Just then, the secretary, Julia, called out to me.
What are you standing around for? Come on, you're not the newbie here.
The beautiful-faced woman approached us, her heels clicking with step. I was just about to sit down.
There's plenty of work to do. Please get to it quickly.
I managed to suppress a laugh and instinctively looked down. So, it looks like I'm busy. You'll have to shred your unnecessary documents. I handed the documents back to him. Then, his face turned red as he raised his voice.
No way, this guy is no different from a newbie. A comeback from a demotion, right? Worse than a newbie.
What are you talking about? Here, this is the CEO's seat.
He couldn't hide his shock at her words. His face turned pale, and he started to tremble.
CEO, Julia, what are you talking about?
He was quite agitated and confronted her closely, but she remained perfectly calm.
That's right. Matthew has been the president of a subsidiary. He has turned around many companies by collecting bad debts. He's a commendable person.
She smiled warmly. Yes, just as she said, I had turned around many companies over the last 10 years, climbing up to the position of president, and now here I am. It's not just about empathizing with people. There are those who try to deceive and default on their loans. And in those cases, I have to take firm actions like asset seizure, judging people, and acting accordingly. I am different from those days when I was driven only by emotion. Mike, with his mouth opening and closing like a fish in front of me. But when the talk about returning to the main office came up, I was in a similar state. I never imagined being called back as the head of the parent company. No, I'm not such an admirable person. Just a high school grad making a comeback. Mike was clearly shaken.
Well, I didn't know you were the CEO. To say a person of your stature is useless. I'm really sorry for being so disrespectful.
He stumbled over his words, quickly changing his attitude. He was trying hard to smile, but I can almost hear his heart pounding. It's okay, to you. Someone with just a high school diploma is considered lowly and useless, right? If that's what you think, then so be it. I smiled at him gently.
Well,
but judging people solely based on their education isn't what we need at this bank. Among our clients are high school grads and people from various walks of life. It's unacceptable to lump everyone together like that. I'm not telling you to change your way of thinking. I'm saying your way of thinking doesn't fit this bank. Maybe you should look for a company that appreciates your perspective. I said it strongly, partly as payback for him mocking my parents. His face was expressionless. The incident earlier qualifies as a serious misconduct. We'll set up a third-party committee to investigate whether he has caused any similar issues. The decision on his punishment will be announced later. I sat down at my desk.
I understand what you're thinking, Matthew. May I guess?
Julia saw right through me. I plan to assign him to a subsidiary, just like me, believing in his potential for growth among the new employees, hoping he would realize his mistakes and grow, just like I did. However, it seemed he wouldn't follow the same path as me.
Why should I follow orders from a high school grad? That guy is the CEO. This bank had finished. Even though the world is an academically based society.
I heard he was spreading his dissatisfaction within the company. His high academic pride must not allow it. Meanwhile, I reviewed the customer list to further improve the bank's performance. There was a familiar name on the customer list. It was a company named Star Production. Feeling something was off, I immediately contacted my subordinate at the subsidiary. It turned out Star Production had taken out a loan and immediately purchased financial products. The timeline seems off. Why would they take on such a risk to buy financial products with a loan? Feeling uneasy, I asked Julia to look into it. And sure enough, Mike was in charge of Star Production.
This
needs a thorough investigation. Julia promptly started the investigation. The next day, she brought me the investigation report. Wow, that was fast.
Yes, I asked a reliable and excellent investigation form.
It seemed Mike had coerced the president of Star Production into buying financial products to boost his own performance. We'll need to check his other clients as well.
Yes, that's already in progress.
She was a truly capable secretary. As a result, 70% of his clients were loan targets. Further investigations brought forward audio recordings of extortion, damning evidence. While he was suspended at home, we called him in for a talk.
A high school grad has no right to summon me.
He looked at me with a face that seemed ready to spit out such words, visibly displeased. I have some questions about your sales methods. Have you been achieving your sales results through inappropriate means?
What are you implying? I have no idea what you're talking about.
I was surprised by his answer. I had hoped to hear the truth and an apology from him directly, which is why I called him in. Yet, all he could say was, "I don't know." Reluctantly, I placed in front of him the list of customers who were pressured into buying financial products after taking out loans. I also played the recording of him threatening his customers. Seeing his eyes widen at this, I pressed him for answers. Can you still pretend you don't know anything about this? What kind of sales tactics were you using? Mike remained silent. He'll have no more excuses after all this evidence. Staying silent, Mike seemed to freeze. To move things along, I asked him again. You really know nothing about this? Finally, Mike spoke up. Right after joining, another new employee was the top salesperson, which deeply wounded Mike's pride. He became obsessed with the need to be the top salesman, leading him to commit these acts. Ridiculous. Sales are important, but we're a bank because of our customers. Threatening customers is unheard of. Using loans meant to expand businesses or protect families and employees solely for personal gain is unacceptable for a banker. I had intended to send you to a subsidiary as a form of discipline, but this is a clear case for immediate dismissal. Hearing my words, Mike collapsed to his knees and apologized.
Please, anything but that.
Then, along with Julia, Mike and I visited each company he had extorted to apologize. I will take over his responsibilities, planning to provide the necessary support for their recovery. Afterward, it seems Mike couldn't mention his disciplinary dismissal in interviews, struggling to secure a full-time position. Rumors were circulating that he was getting by, working part-time and living at a bar. For someone with his high educational background, I imagine his pride must be in tatters. This was the result of his wrongdoing. So he needs to face reality and find a livelihood that matches his capabilities. Phew, Julia. Thank you so much. Your quick actions were a big help.
I'm your secretary. I'll do whatever is asked of me.
Julia smiled warmly, offering words of encouragement. Then, with a slight change in expression, Julia whispered,
Well, maybe I'd like a little thank you, or a reward.
Seeing her playful smile, I mustered up the courage to invite her out. How about we go for dinner? Julia had always been my savior. She was the one who got me into the bank. I had harbored feelings for her, and it seemed she had keenly noticed. She laughed joyfully at my invitation and accepted it without hesitation. Captivated by her various smiles, I found myself staring. Years later, Julia and I were walking through the tourist spot where my family's home is located. Once fading, it's now popular among the youth for its retro charm. Julia, aiming for those Instagrammable shots, snapped away with her camera, but became noticeably nervous as we stood in front of my family's home. I took her hand, opened the door. Dad, Mom, I brought the person I want to introduce to you guys. I had found the person I wanted to spend my life with.